envision a world that works for everyone and for all creation. Have you heard that before? Yeah. This is the last line from our Centers for Spiritual Living Global Vision Statement. And it has 9 more statements that it contains. Kind of hard to read on the screen, but there's 10 statements in their entirety that represent our Centers for Spiritual Living global vision for mankind and our relationship to each other, our world, and to God. Ideals that we teach from and hold for all of humanity. Creating a world that works for all is also part of our vision, our mission here at Scottsdale Center for Spiritual Living, which is to teach spiritual principles of positive living to create a world that works for all. Now, you may know that I'm teaching the Foundations class right now, and a few weeks ago we were talking about this global vision for Centers for Spiritual Living. And we landed on this principle of creating a world that works for all. And we had a discussion around that, and what does that mean, really? So when you hear that yourself, what goes in your mind? What does that mean to you, creating a world that works for all? Is it a world that works according to your beliefs? Is it a world that has the same values that you have? Is it a world that maybe is the same values that we see in the Middle East and the Islamic tradition or the Jewish laws? Or is it a world that is solely dedicated to protecting the environment? Or maybe it's South American values and ideals and governance. We go south of the border on our planet, south of the southern part of our planet. What is it for you? What is it for you? A world that works for all. It's a big order, isn't it? It's a really big order for Centers for Spiritual Living to put out into consciousness, out into the world, that this is who we are and what we stand for. What we arrived at in class as we looked at this idea was that we must give as God gives. We must live as God lives. We must love as God loves. And that is my talk today, loving as God loves. As we continue with our practicing the presence as love this month of February, it's been all about love. And we're ending up today with this idea that to love as God loves. Ernest Holmes, our founder of Centers for Spiritual Living and the author of The Science of Mind that we teach from, he tells us that God is the giver of all things by the means of love. The Spirit is always at peace. There's no argument in the divine mind. The Spirit has never doubted itself, opposed itself, or disagreed with itself. This is the oneness that is God. I think this quote pretty much covers it all, doesn't it? God is the giver of all things through love, and it doesn't argue with itself. So let's look at this a little more deeply and see what Holmes is trying to show us in this. Do you agree that nothing is in existence or that has not been created from the one divine substance of God, the one mind? All that we see was first an idea, wasn't it? We've used my music stand for 4 years now, that this is a divine idea in somebody's mind before it ever got made and manufactured. Think about this building that we are in. Think about this building. Many of you know that I've been in commercial development for many, many years. And I've sat in a lot of design meetings with architects, engineers, and developers, where we go in and we sit down and we put down a survey and go, here's the land. Here's a picture of the land. Here's a flat picture of the lot. What can we build? What can we build on that? And then the creative ideas begin to flow from all of those people. And they're governed by law because there are certain laws that the city has, ordinance and guidelines for how much ratio of building we can put on the lot, how much parking we have to have versus how much we want. Does it have to have landscaping? And how much landscaping? How tall can it be? And then the creative ideas, what do the windows look like? What's the exterior structure and color going to look like? And then once the architect gets all those ideas and draws that on a flat piece of paper, it's still not a building, is it? It's still just a flat piece of paper. But creativity and ideas went into that, didn't it? From where? Out of the blue, right? And then the contractor takes those pieces of paper and gets to working on the creation part of it and brings it to life and makes it into 3 dimensions. Again, governed by law, though, right? Because they're more governed probably by the physical laws, structural requirements, how to frame things in, how thick to make the concrete, all of those types of things. So there's law that governs that as well. And then finally we end up with the finished product, the building that we all get to move around in and live, move, and have our being in, so to speak. So this is another example of the creative process, isn't it? The seed is the design team, the developers, engineers, and architects. That's the seed. That's the idea. And then the law is our contractor who's actually making it, right? Turning those ideas into something of form. And the manifestation or the plant is the actual building that we're in. So we have another example of how this universal creative process that we teach in our Centers for Spiritual Living actually works in our lives. So ideas are the creative substance of the divine. Ideas. Ideas. There's no shovels and bulldozers in God. The ideas for those things came from the divine. How to use those things comes as knowledge and wisdom, right? Through us, its creation. Everything evolves from the invisible to the visible. This is an ancient teaching that we see throughout many faith traditions, most faith traditions. From the invisible to the visible. So Holmes goes on to tell us in this quote that God gives by the means of love. Now we've been talking all month about God is love, right? That's a pretty basic concept that most of us have probably heard all of our lives. God is love. And it loves so much that its nature is to just give. It's to create and to give endlessly. We see it in nature, don't we? With the abundance of nature as it springs forth around us. We see it in the air that we breathe and experience that we've got plenty of. Our heartbeat that we don't have to think about, thank goodness. Right? And the systems of our biology that just continue to work. The universe is always giving of itself through its creation. It gives us apples through the apple tree, creates the apple, gives us apples through the apple tree. So the other part of the quote by Holmes that I like is the idea that spirit has never doubted itself, opposed itself, or disagreed with itself. Can you say that? Most of us can't, can we? We've doubted ourselves at times. We've doubted ourselves at times. Did I leave the garage door open? Did I turn off the coffee pot? It can be something that simple, or it can be some major thing. Am I making the right decision? We've all done that. Opposed ourselves. Or disagreed with ourselves. Some decision that we've made. We argue with ourselves. Anybody have arguments in your head? Pros and cons. Which way am I going to go? How am I going to move? We do that. But Holmes is saying Spirit doesn't do that. Spirit doesn't do that. It's purely one. And it cannot exist as a house divided against itself. Because it's one. It is one. It knows nothing of evil, doubt, opposition, or in competition or disagreement. Now that can be hard for us to get our human minds around because we have a tendency to anthropomorphize God and make it a human with a human personality, don't we? We just have a tendency to do that. Many of us were trained as very young children that that's what God was. And with our human mind, it's very difficult to understand, really grasp the magnitude of what is infinite. I mean, I certainly can't. When I think of the universe, I think of pictures I've seen from NASA and think that's it. But that's not it, is it? It goes beyond that and beyond that and beyond even that. So infinite is hard for us to grasp. It's hard for us to grasp, so we have a tendency to limit it. We have a tendency to limit it. But how do we lift ourselves above those arguments? Above the reality surrounding us on CNN? How do we lift ourselves out of that to live, give, and love as God? This infinite thing that we have a hard time understanding. Well, I've used this question ever since it came up in class as part of my contemplation, my meditations, and I've really delved into it. How can I possibly love as God loves? How can I do that? I have to accept the principle of oneness. I have to move my awareness, my vibration, my frequency up into that higher realm of spirit to even begin to conceptualize what that could possibly be. Emerson has a great quote about getting our bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. And that's what I have to do, because my bloated nothingness is blocking me from seeing the infinite nature of the divine, from loving as God loves. And what is that bloated nothingness? It's my judgments, my righteousness. All those things that get in the way of just recognizing that we're all one, not just in this room because we all are like-minded people, right? No, everybody on our planet, everywhere. Everybody on our planet, everywhere. That we are all one in this divine drama or comedy, whichever you call life. And when we can really get our mind around that idea of oneness, really begin to, in the moments, the glimmers as I call them, of understanding at the deepest level our own spiritual nature, that we are whole, we are perfect, we are one. We are connected in that oneness. We can begin to understand some of the mystical sayings of people like Jesus, when he said, love your enemies and bless the one who curses you, and do what is beautiful to the one who hates you, and pray over those who take you by force and persecute you. Be like God, who makes the sun rise on the good and the evil, and the rain fall on the just and the unjust. Can you imagine those directions and going, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. Right. Loving those who love us is easy, isn't it? Somebody loves me? Yeah, that's easy. Somebody that doesn't love me, somebody that doesn't align with me, that can be harder, can't it? That can be harder to love those people. But that's what this is telling us. To love as God loves, we have to rise above our own personal judgments, our righteousness, and move into that one whole way of loving. We can no longer be a house divided. We teach here that the law, which is also an aspect of God, plays no favorites. You've heard that, right? Plays no favorites. And that's the same thing that Jesus was saying, that God's rain falls on the just and the unjust. Plays no favorites. We teach that as God plays no favorites, our physical laws are the same way, aren't they? The structure of a building, that engineering, works the same for everybody, doesn't it? Oh, well, if you want to build your building, you don't have to put those supports in it. You do. You got to put supports in your building, right? But you don't. Your building will just stand up by itself. It doesn't work that way. The physical laws work the same for everybody, whether it's gravity, mathematics, electricity, and our spiritual laws are the same. Law of attraction, law of reflection, law of circulation. They work alike for everybody. They work alike for everybody. The Bible tells us to love God first and to love our neighbor as ourself. love God first and love our neighbors as ourselves. And these are, according to Jesus, the two greatest commandments. Remember, there's 10 of them. He says these are the two most important ones. Love God, love your neighbors. And I agree, because it's a lot like the golden rule, isn't it? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And these are all universal spiritual truths that run through all faith traditions. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. If you want to be yelled at, yell at other people, right? Yeah. It is universal truth. Love God, each other, do good. It's pretty simple. Holmes wrote another book called Richer Living. And in this one he says, when we let the love that is within us go out to the God who is in all people and the divine presence that is in all things, then we are loving God with all our heart and with all our soul and mind, because we are recognizing that the Spirit within us is the same Spirit that we meet in others. This is loving our neighbors as ourselves. So he's saying the same thing, isn't he, that Jesus was trying to teach us as well. Love God, each other, do good. So we were talking about hot yoga a little bit earlier. Does anybody do yoga? Have you ever heard? Wow! Okay, so you're all coming to the hot yoga thing, right? I'm on the back row. You've probably heard the Hindu greeting, Namaste. I used it this morning in our meditation if you were here 20 minutes before service. You've heard that Namaste. And it means I bow to the divine in you. And it's usually accompanied with a small gesture. I bow to the divine in you. And I think that is so beautiful as an honoring and a recognition of a soul-to-soul communication. I honor the divine in you. And the only way that I can honor the divine in you is that I recognize the divine in myself, isn't it? And that's really what this greeting is about, is that soul connection of recognizing the God within each of us. So you're probably sitting there thinking, what is she talking about? Love as God loves? Is that even possible? And you know, as I wrote this talk and went through it and thought about it, I don't think it's 100% possible, because we don't understand the infinite. We don't understand how magnificent it is. But we can practice, can't we? We can practice loving as God loves. We've talked about God as relationship. Remember that? That Spirit is not the guy in the sky. It's a relationship that we have, the most intimate of relationships. And when I know that, when I have that relationship with that infinite presence, I know love. I experience it. Those of you who have a relationship with the divine, you experience that. You know what that is. And that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about, is that intimate relationship with the divine. And when I know that, and when I'm in that place of recognizing my own oneness, my own wholeness, my own connectivity with the divine, then it's very easy to recognize that in others and to begin to create a world that works for all. At least one person at a time, because that's our work, isn't it? You know, we can't really go out and affect the entire planet at once, but we can certainly affect our individual relationships, our one-on-ones. And that affects another, and that affects another, and affects another, and it becomes that spiral effect. And that's our work in creating a world that works for all, is to first love ourselves, have our relationship with the divine, have our daily spiritual practice, and then take that out into the world, into everyone that we meet, talk to, have an experience with. That's how we do it. That's what we call walking the talk around here. So let's look at some practicing the principles this week and see how we can maybe love as God loves. See how we can practice this. The first one is give as God gives. What if you knew, you really, really, really knew, that you were sourced of everything that you ever needed, beyond depletion, always, how would you show up in the world? How would you give of your time, your talent, your treasure, if you knew it was not depletable? Giving as God gives just because it feels good, without worry. So whenever you're presented this week with an opportunity to give, ask yourself, how would God give? No holding back. How would God give? Again, time, talent, or treasure. A gift, a smile, the gift of attention or listening. Just listening to someone. Is that a gift? Have you ever been genuinely heard, listened to, that the other person is not listening from the concept of, okay, how am I going to respond? But just listening. What a gift. What a gift that is. Kindness. Being present to yourself and to others, and to give as God gives. So look for opportunities this week. Number 2, love as God loves. Same thing, looking for opportunities to be loved this week. If we're presented with an opportunity, a situation, a conflict, or competition, how can I love as God loves? How can I be love here? And if we think of 3 words, solution, resolution, creativity. We live, move, and have our being in the one mind, the infinite creative mind of God. We have access to every solution, every answer that we need, if we but take time to be in that stillness and to ask and to open to what that answer is. But yet we want to stay sometimes in our humanness and argue it out, get in our righteousness again, rather than allowing for that win-win. The rain falls equally. The sun shines equally. God's all about win-win. God plays no favorites. Why do we? If we can let go of that and elevate ourselves up into that higher vibration, that higher frequency of love, then we're looking for solutions. We're looking for resolution. We're looking for creative ways. Because what does creativity do when we're problem solving? It evolves us, doesn't it? Because we've come up with a third way. It's not black or white. We've come up with gray or bronze or some other color. We've come up with a different way in that moment. We've created anew again. In our workshop on Wednesday, we did a little exercise where we took a bag of basically just junk, pieces, parts of stuff, and we created something brand new in about 3 minutes. And out of that creation came a relationship to what was created. It was the divine process absolutely being demonstrated. Because everybody that created something had a story about what they created, what it meant to them. They gave it meaning. They gave it meaning. And so we can do that when we're in a challenging situation in our life. How can I create something new here that's never been created before? And create a win-win for everybody. Powerful, powerful stuff. So loving as God loves and giving as God gives means loving without fear. No boundaries, no divisions, and living from the wholeness of who we really are as divine expressions of this one. It's a choice. It's a choice that we can make. So I want to close out today with a beautiful idea from my favorite Sufi poet, Rumi. And he says, be a lamp, be a lifeboat, be a ladder. Help someone's soul heal. Walk out of your house like a shepherd. Isn't that beautiful? So let's all do our part this week to create a world that works for all by loving as God loves. So I want to invite you to join me as we affirm this in prayer this morning. How good it is to recognize this one presence that is life. as it lives, moves, and has its being through each one of us here today, as individualized expressions of it, each one unique, each one whole, each one perfect in that expression. And as I recognize this unity, this oneness, this divinity that we are, I speak my word for it about each one of us, knowing that each of us is the love that Spirit is. We are this united, universal love. We came in that way. We came in as that bundle of pure, positive love. It is our birthright. And we are here to remember that that is who and what we are. Not separate from Source, but Source energy itself, here in form. And so I know for anyone this day that's got anything on their heart that they are seeking prayer around, that as they lift that into their awareness, that healing is revealed. If it's an idea, if it is a solution, if it is a physical healing, a financial healing, whatever it might be, we simply affirm right here, right now, that it is healed, revealed, it is made whole. And so I am grateful for the manifestation of the prayer. I'm grateful for knowing that God is love, and I am of that love, as each one of us is in this room. And so I just lovingly release this into the activity of law, knowing that it is done, and that we are blessed. And so it is.